I'm sorry to be a few minutes late. I'm still just in shock from a colossal mistake that Mr. Rossi made. I'm just having to get over it. Good morning. This meeting of the California High-Speed Rail Authority Board will come to order, and we'll ask the Secretary to please call the roll.
Good morning. We'll start with Director Shank. She's absent. Vice Chair Richards. Here. Director Rossi.
Here.
Director Perez-Estelano.
Here.
Director Henning.
Here.
Director Selby.
Here.
Director Correa.
Here.
Chair Richard.
I'm here. I was going to ask Mr. Rossi to lead us in the pledge, but since he might mess it up, I'll ask Vice Chair Tom Richards to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. We'll begin this morning with the public comment session, and I have speaker cards here. We take them in the order in which they're received, except that I give our elected officials an opportunity to go first. Seeing none, we'll take these in the order in which they were received. Robert Allen, you got here early this morning. Bob, you're up first, followed by Diana Lacombe and Marvin Dean. Bob?
Grades separate. Grades separate. Grades separate. There's, don't run the high-speed rail on the Caltrain tracks. Caltrain has dozens of grade crossings between San Jose and San Francisco. True high-speed rail is fenced with no grade crossings. California in 2008 voted for such safe, reliable high-speed rail. Caltrain's top speed now is 79 miles an hour. Most roads in the state are fenced, no cross traffic when they reach as much as 60 miles an hour. The runways on our airport, major airports, are fenced, don't have any cross traffic. Yet Caltrain has cross traffic, dozens of grade crossings at 79 miles an hour, and I understand you propose to run high-speed rail as high as 110 or more miles an hour. At Brabant's, Illinois, Amtrak learned the hazards of roads crossing 79-mile-an-hour track. More recent crashes on Metro North and Metrolink tell the same story. Your high-speed rail route using Caltrain tracks with commuter stations and dozens of grade crossings is neither safe nor reliable. I urge you to do what the CPUC, which has jurisdiction over safety, should be doing. That you end first phase of high-speed rail to the Bay Area at San Jose. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Ms. Lacombe, good morning. She'll be followed by Marvin Dean.
Good morning, Chairman Richard, members of the board, Mr. Morales. I have only one issue today, and that's fostering small business. I've mentioned to this board before that in the Code of Federal Regulations, there's a section for set-asides called fostering small business. And I've talked to staff about having a certification for this small business, because you're looking at federal funds. And I've been told that it's not necessary. Well, I think that we need FRA to let us know if we can use the Department of General Services Small Business Directory for the fostering small business. The other item is also on the same topic, that I believe that that the prime contractors should be oriented on this fostering small business so that they know that they have some flexibility to bring in a team, say of, $1 million and up, and set it aside for small business. So I would again like to request that that be sent to FRA. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lacombe. Marvin Dean, followed by, it looks like, Vida Wright. Good morning, Mr. Dean.
Good morning. I had not planned to be here today. I thought I'd watch this session on the video screen, but something came up.
But you decided you wanted to spend 5 hours on the highway.
Well, I had to be helping on some other business as well, so I thought I'd run over here. I'm here, first of all, to promote something that we're doing in Bakersfield on June 16th and 17th, and I'm also speaking to the contractors in the room and the folks that are watching this. We're going to do something called a high-speed rail and public transportation get-ready sessions. And we're going to have folks that are looking for those community benefit jobs to be included, and we're going to also look for the folks that are small business. This project is moving now. I think when you award CP4, you've already awarded 1, 2, and 3. CP4, this thing is probably going to boom from both directions in the Valley to make those timelines. And a lot of people in the Valley, small business, are not quite there yet. So what this conference is, we're inviting contractors that do business with you to come. It's going to be a free event. It's going to be an all-day session on the 17th. All the workshops we're going to have, all of the open general sessions will be free to the public. Anybody can come. And the thing about it is making sure they get the actual information and have folks there ready on the ground that can help them get ready for this opportunity. So I wanted to just come in and plug it. Now your CEO has agreed to come and be our lunch speaker, and we're very grateful for that. And I just wanted to put it out there and make sure that all the contractors in the room and the ones that are watching know that this is an opportunity for them to network with the small business and the folks that are looking for the community benefit jobs. So I just want to put that on the record. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. We have the material that you handed out. Thank you very much, and thanks for Marvin, thanks for doing this. This is great.
I have some handouts on the table out front for those in the audience.
All right. Thank you very much. Yes, good morning, Vida Wright, and then she'll be followed by Leanne Eager. Good morning, Ms. Wright.
Actually, it's Vida, sir.
Excuse me. I'm sorry, ma'am.
That's okay. Good morning, Chairman Richards, distinguished members of the board. I wanted to share with you that California High-Speed Rail Project was featured in the May-June infrastructure issue of the Military Engineer, which is a bi-monthly magazine that is published by the Society of American Military Engineers. I want to thank Scott Jarvis and John Tapping for writing this great article, and also to the public affairs staff, Lisa Marie and Karen Massey and others who work with the SAME editorial staff to publish the article. It's not only a great article about a great project, but also showcases California's leadership in infrastructure, environmental issues, and as well as creating economic opportunities for small businesses. I have copies for all of you, and I hope you enjoy reading it. Thank you.
Ms. Wright, thank you, and I apologize for mispronouncing your first name. Sorry. Thank you. Leanne Eager, newly appointed by the Governor of California to the Commission on International Trade and Investment.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And thank you for having me this morning. I have to say, I apologize for not being here last month. I was in Washington, D.C., fighting for water for the Valley. I just take on those little issues. So yesterday, we had Mayor Ledford and the Palmdale team. We had them come to Fresno to tell them about the things that we're doing in Fresno. And I think it wasn't until we started talking about all the things going on that I realized all the things going on in Fresno. But it's really been exciting. We've certainly had our issues with the right-of-way and getting folks moved, but we've had some great successes, and I think we're moving in the right direction there. Even out in the county with the farmers, we've had some really big successes out there. We met with the county yesterday morning to move some things around, and I think with that meeting, we saved about 4 farms in that process. But what's really exciting is we took a group to the Mandela Center in Oakland to look at the training center, and we spent the day there and got excited about what the possibilities were for training folks in Fresno on transportation. So we're going to go for it, and we're going to start a Mandela Center in the Central Valley to get people trained for these jobs. The other thing that we're realized finally is happening is that some of those jobs that are outside of actually working on the rail system are coming to fruition. As we're working out in the county and we see we don't have enough people that can dig wells. There's no well drillers. They're already 18 months behind in digging wells already out in the county. Moving irrigation systems from one place to another. There's not enough jobs. There's not enough people. So we started talking to some of those local businesses about how do they expand in those kinds of jobs. And we got the Department of Social Services to say they will pay for training for those jobs. So now not only are we training folks to work on the system, we're training folks to do a lot of those other jobs. We have truck driver training because we realize we don't have truck drivers in order to move people from place to place. So we already have had 2 truck driver trainings that we got people certified, and I think we have about 40 people that are ready to go on the truck driver side. So all of those things that we knew were coming, they're actually here now. So we're excited about those possibilities in the Valley. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Eager. I'm actually very familiar with the Mandela Center in Oakland. That's an excellent, that's great. Good for you. Thank you. Our last speaker this morning that we have speaker cards for is Mr. Ted Hart. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Well, I stood before the board 2 months ago and told you of a lack of compliance with the law, Public Utilities Code Section 185033, and your failure to provide the public with a chronology and cost estimate for the entire statewide high-speed rail system. I then followed up with a letter to the board. Chairman Richard responded to me in writing last month, simply stated that with no supporting rationale, quote, according to our interpretation of existing statute, including Prop 1A and Senate Bill 1029, our business plans are in compliance with the law. So I stand here again, this time hoping the media will pick up on this issue, and once again petition for your compliance with the law by reading into the record another letter addressed to the board. Dear board members, an obvious and unusual feature of Proposition 1A was the legislature's deep concern over high-speed rail's financial risk to the state. Accordingly, the legislature passed Public Utilities Code Section 185033, which requires the authority every time they submit a new business plan to include, quote, a proposed chronology for the construction of the state high-speed rail system and the estimated capital cost for each segment or combination of segments. This has never been done in either the 2012 or 2014 business plan. The reason is obvious. You don't want the public or the legislature to know, because an honest, updated cost estimate for the entire statewide system and every segment thereof could well exceed $150 billion, and more likely would be $200 billion range today, and would not be completed until the second half of this century. Something that would frighten the legislature and alarm the public and prove the scary predictions of Senator Simitian, who warned of this in July 2012 when the appropriation for Prop 1A was passed. So how about some transparency? Your obligation is not limited to just the San Francisco, Los Angeles, Anaheim segment. You have to deal with all of Phase 2, San Diego, Inland Empire, and Sacramento. The current estimate of $67.6 billion for Phase 1 is certainly questionable because these public works projects always increase enormously. Witness the Bay Bridge. Your statewide program environmental impact report, certified nearly a decade ago in November of 2005, makes no mention of a Phase 1. The certification is for an entire statewide system, and Prop 1A mandates that construction be, quote, consistent with the authority's certified environmental impact reports of November 2005 and July 9, 2009. So comply with the law, comply with the precise and mandatory statutes, PUC Section 185033 and Proposition 1A. You have ignored these since 2008. It's already really quite simple. We want to know two things. What is the total estimated cost for an entire statewide high-speed train system, and when is the estimate completion date? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Okay, we have completed the public comment section of the agenda, and we'll now move to the regular order. The first item will be the consideration of approval of the board minutes from the April 14th board meeting.
Second.
Okay, was moved by Mr. Rossi, seconded by Ms. Perez Estelano. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Vice Chair Richards?
Yes.
Director Rossi?
Yes.
Director Perez Estelano?
Yes.
Director Henning?
Yes.
Director Selby?
Yes.
Director Correa?
Yes.
Chair Richard?
Yes. Thank you. Moving on to item 2, consideration of approval to release the request for proposals for design-build services for construction package 4. Scott Jarvis will present. Do you want to have any introductory remarks, Mr. Morales?
Just, Mr. Chairman, this is another clear step forward in the process now of completing the construction down the valley, and we continue to be very pleased by the global interest and participation in this program, and the fact that we've had 5 very qualified teams interested in competing for this, and Scott can talk through the details, but it's the same process we've used for CP1 and for CP2-3.
Okay. Mr. Jarvis, good morning.
All right. Good morning, Chairman Richard, Mr. Morales, and board members. In June of 2013, the authority awarded a contract for design and construction of Construction Package 1, CP1. And that was the first 29 miles of the first construction segment, FCS, of the California high-speed rail system. And then in January of 2015, the board approved the recommendation to enter into a contract for design and construction of CP23, which is the next 60 miles of the FCS. An executed contract for CP23 is anticipated later this month. And so the purpose of this agenda item is to seek the board approval to issue the RFP for CP4 in accordance with the term sheet, and to include a stipend in the amount of proven costs of up to $2 million per proposal. Construction of the FCS involves design-build contracts for the final design and construction of all high-speed rail trackway civil infrastructure. The authority has started a 2-phase procurement process for the third of the design-build contracts, designated as CP4, and that will extend approximately 22 miles in length through the Central Valley and will include construction of at-grade and aerial sections of high-speed rail alignment. So 5 teams submitted statements of qualifications in response to the request for qualifications for CP4, including 2 teams that had not previously submitted SOQs for CP1 or CP23. These SOQs went through an extensive review and evaluation to establish qualified teams based on project experience, team organization, and technical competency, project understanding, and other key factors. The RFQ phase is now complete, and all 5 teams have been deemed qualified and are invited to participate in the second phase, request for proposals. So the proposals submitted by the teams in response to the RFP will be thoroughly evaluated and scored to determine the team offering the best overall value. As with CP1 and CP23, The scoring will be weighted 30% on technical and 70% on price. So recommendation to the board to enter into a design-build contract with the selected team is presently expected to take place late in 2015. So CP4 now extends approximately 22 miles through the counties of Tulare and Kern and the cities of Wasco and Shafter. CP4 is bounded by a location approximately 1 mile north of the Tulare-Kern County line to the north and Poplar Avenue to the south, with an updated estimated cost of $400 to $500 million. So the work, services, labor, and materials to be provided and performed by the design-build contractor involve developing the final design and constructing CP4 and all associated activities to perform that design and construction. So the anticipated schedule for the procurement includes the following major milestones. Issue the RFP on Wednesday, May 27th. Meetings with potential proposers regarding alternative technical concepts, ATC, submittals, and one-on-one meetings in July of 2015. ATC submittal deadline in August of 2015. The proposal deadline will be in October of 2015. Anticipated contract award will be in November 2015. And contractor negotiation and execution will take place during the winter of 2015-16. So staff now recommends board approval of the term sheet and stipend for construction package 4, as well as the approval for the issuance of the RFP pursuant to the terms in the attached board resolution. Yes?
I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
As you go through this list here of things that are getting done,
yeah,
who makes the final recommendation as to X company or Y company?
There is an executive committee that is established, and there's a chair of that committee. Diana Gomez has been the chair of the committee of the RFQ process to date and will continue in that role. And so they'll provide that final recommendation to the board.
Who's on this committee?
On the committee was Diana Gomez, John Tapping, Ophelia Alcantara, and Melissa Dumond, our planning director.
Okay, then I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, as we move forward, that before we pick a committee here, that the committee be reviewed by this board to be sure that we're comfortable that the expertise necessary to make this decision are, in fact, there on the board, on that committee, because our approval is predicated on that recommendation, and I'd like to know, if I'm going to vote in the future on these issues, what are the backgrounds of the individuals that will lead them to be the appropriate people to make this recommendation.
How do you want to proceed today?
I'm happy to vote for this. But before we get to the, I don't want to confuse the two issues. This seems fine with me, but as we move down that process and we ultimately have a recommendation, I'd like to know who is on that committee making the recommendation.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to also second Mr. Rossi's recommendation, maybe not second, but emphasize that I think we need to have some of that input at the early stages of this as well.
Okay. Very good. It's a good suggestion.
We will implement that.
Okay.
And to be fair, I know that previously, Scott, you used to be a little bit more descriptive in the the board memos, and so maybe for the benefit of our newest member, some of that history about how this happens, because I noticed it was missing, like, that process that I remember we went through before. Might be helpful.
Yeah, we did pare it down a bit.
Yeah,
this time.
I noticed that. I'm
yeah.
like, okay.
Okay, all right.
But that would be helpful.
Okay.
Did you finish your presentation, or if there were other things?
Yes, I did. We're recommending board approval of the term sheet, the stipend, and the issuance of the RFP pursuant to the attached board resolution.
So let me
and
just
I'd be
ask,
happy to answer any other questions that you might have.
Well, the question that Mr. Rossi raised that Mr. Correa also jumped in on, my only reaction to hearing the composition of the committee was I like all the people who are on there, but apart from Ms. Gomez, how much technical, construction management? Well, Mr. Tapping, I guess, also. So I'm just trying to see if the balance is is sufficient in terms of evaluating the technical risks and also being able to fairly evaluate the ATCs, the
Right.
alternative technical concepts.
No, it's a very important question.
No,
a
thank
good
you.
question. In addition to the committee, and we can certainly go through that, and we'll make sure the committee reflects the board's interests, but I should point out the committee is then assisted by different technical subcommittees, staffing groups who specifically look at the financial components, the technical components. We have an explicit process to look at the alternative technical concepts as they come in. So it's not just those 5 people evaluating this. There's extensive support beneath them providing the expertise into them. But we'll also make sure that to the extent we need to adjust the membership of the executive committee to reflect things, we will.
Okay, so I think taking to heart then the spirit of the recommendation from Mr. Rossi and as seconded by Mr. Correa, when you come, and Ms. Perez-Estelano said that last time we had a more descriptive thing of the process. So when you do this, let's go beyond the executive committee and just kind of give a flavor for the entire structure of how the decision-making is done there. Okay, great. Other questions? Ms. Selby.
Yeah, I think I just want this for the record, but the RFP does include that 30% would go to small business?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Through the chair.
Mr. Correa?
Could I just... Okay.
Go ahead.
I was just going to, on the small business point, I do, yes, as Scott said, and I want to remind or update everyone on where we are in the small business participation. This is Small Business Month, I believe, and we have under contract currently over 200 small businesses, over 229, I believe it is, and 205 of them are California-based small businesses. We have 64 DBEs and 32 disabled veteran business enterprises under contract today, and it's producing, that board goal and the commitment is producing real results out in the field. And the great thing is most of those businesses are local businesses, and so it's really putting the benefit where it's needed in the Valley.
And how are we doing? Those numbers are great. How are we doing on the percentage of dollars?
The percentage we have on every contract since the board put the 30% in, we have hit the target. We're actually tracking, I believe, slightly above overall, but right at the percentage. We track on a monthly basis then the actual expenditures. Right now, we're not at the full 30 because the expenditure rates will change over time and as we get into construction. But there's significant dollars going out, and we've just issued last week an updated report that's on our website that breaks down the companies, how much money, in fact, has been spent in the last quarter on small businesses, and how many people are involved. So that's something we put out quarterly. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Correa?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Morales, 32 disabled veterans. How many firms? What percentage? Do you know what percentage of the contracts that would be?
It's 3% is the goal.
Are we hitting that target?
We are hitting the target, yes.
We are hitting that.
Yes.
And of those 32, are we expanding the pool of people competing in the disabled veterans group? When I was chair of Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, we used to find that the same set of small disabled veteran firms would apply, and we weren't expanding the opportunities for others.
Right. That we are certainly trying to. We're leveraging a few different ways to do that. One, we have a business advisory committee or council that includes representation of the DVBE groups. That advises us on ways to improve outreach, coordination, certification. We're working through Department of General Services, through Veteran Affairs, other ways to try to expand. It's a constant challenge, certainly to do that. And any thoughts?
When we audited the state of California, that is what we found, that it was very much of a challenge. So I would put that challenge to this group as well to try to make the extra effort to reach out to those veterans groups. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Correa. Vice Chair Richard.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Scott, with regards to this stipend, which is capped at $2 million.
Yes.
Do you recall what the stipend was for CP1 and then CP2 and 3?
Yes, it was $2 million for those contracts as well.
So does it make any sense that the stipend should be somehow considered against what the estimated cost of the project is? I know it's proven cost, Scott. I mean, Jeff, I understand that.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering, why wouldn't the stipend also adjust based upon the estimated cost of this segment?
We looked at that question, and the thinking on this, and we've looked at what's been done elsewhere too, is that the stipend really is more a reflection of the level of effort to prepare the proposal as opposed to the cost. And it's a very logical question, and again, we did ask it, but everything we understand is that the cost of preparing the proposal, going through the process of doing it, is comparable at this size of a project, whether it's a $500 million or whether it's a $2 billion project. So we did not adjust it at this point. I would point out, because I know the stipends have been a question before, on 2.3. So we award this, only the non-winning responsive bidders get the stipend.
Right.
So on CP23, we will ultimately pay $4 million in stipends, for which we received over $600 million of ATCs in the proposals that we own now. And so we're feel very good about how this process is working and that we're getting the value out of it.
So in the previous stipends for CP1 and then 2 and 3, have the proven costs then in each of the instances ended up being the $2 million?
Yes, they were able to prove the costs in excess of $2 million.
Okay.
And I'd also like to point out we're very pleased with the competition that we continue to get. 5 offers for these submitted SOQs, 2 new firms, and so the stipends likely play a role in that as well.
I just want to take a second and make sure for the public listening that they understood something that Mr. Morales just said, which is that we pay these stipends to firms who are unsuccessful, but in return, we think we get 2 things. One is that we, as Mr. Jarvich said, we encourage more competition because it takes a little bit of the sting out of being a losing bidder if you can recover some of your costs, but only those you can demonstrate. But the other thing that I think is harder for people to see, but is a great benefit, is that by agreeing to submit and in consideration for us paying the stipend, we then own all the intellectual property of that bid for the losing bidder. So if they come in with an alternative technical concept that can save money, but they aren't the best value bidder, we can take that concept and apply it to the winning bidder. So this means, I think, a great benefit to us that if we're both encouraging a large number of people to bid and then being able to harvest the best intellectual concepts that those people bring to us, I think that has proven over time to be well worth the dollars that we're paying.
And, Mr. Chairman, we are putting that into practice on CP1 already, where we have been able to take an ATC that was proposed by one of the non-winning bidders, and we've provided that to our contractor. And so that's we're putting it into practice.
Ms. Perez-Estelano?
Scott, can you remind me, I think we had some meetings or some industry briefings after the first CP1 or 2-3, I can't recall, but there were some briefings we had after a round was released to just say, did we get the stipend right? Did we have the process? I mean, I think we did that. We
did that for CP1, correct.
That was CP1, right?
Yeah, we're still in the process of negotiating for CP23, yes.
Okay, so is that a regular practice that we have, that we go through after we've done one of these
yes.
exercises and we kind of just check with the industry to see if we're right-sizing things?
Yeah, after the RFP stage and after they submit their proposal and their bids, yes, we will go through that process and a debriefing and lessons learned on the process itself. And one of the things that we took away from CP1 was to really have a vigorous ATC process for CP23, and we feel like we have implemented that for CP23 and CP4.
And we have, I would just point out, if you look on the schedule, in June, in fact, we have an industry forum planned that would allow for an open discussion with potential bidders before we're actually receiving their proposals, and would include any suggestions for modifications to the RFP or the contract terms at that point.
Other questions from members? Okay.
Second.
This is an action item, so we'll entertain a motion. Moved by Mr. Rossi, seconded by Vice Chair Richards. Would the Secretary please call the roll?
Vice Chair Richards.
Yes.
Director Rossi.
Yes.
Director Pettis-Estelano.
Yes.
Director Henning.
Yes.
Director Selby.
Yes.
Director Correa.
Yes.
Chair Richard.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, the next item, item 4, is an informational presentation regarding an industry outreach for advancement of the high-speed rail program. Mr. Vaca, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I come before you today to provide some information on the authority's approach to soliciting outreach to the industry, both in the construction industry, high-speed rail operators, financing and investment industry, so that we can solidify our approach for the next round of procurements. As you've heard this morning, both in a public session and with Mr. Jarvis's presentation, that the construction of Central Valley is moving forward aggressively and in meeting our timeframes for that civil construction. Last year, the governor's budget and with the approval of cap and trade greatly increased market interest in our program and is leading to additional opportunities for advancing our program. Last August, this body encouraged us to explore ways to leverage that cap and trade program and to facilitate advancement of the program towards a accelerated schedule. And this is part of that strategy in looking at ways to leverage cap and trade to advance the program in a faster, more efficient, and economical way. The interest increased dramatically after the passing of cap and trade. In this program, we have met with individuals informally, companies, construction companies, investment firms, and others have come in on one-on-one discussions with some of their individual ideas and demonstration of interest to be part of this program. We have also met with 9 train manufacturers earlier this year in an expression of interest that we had on train set procurement, and met with them on a one-on-one basis and explored their ideas on how to advance this program.
Frank, I'm looking at, I guess this is page 3, this one, and it says statements of interest from the private sector. What statements of interest?
Some examples on some of the statements made right there. As
I see
examples.
the statements, but those aren't statements of interest. Tell me what statements of interest. Did someone actually say they had an interest in investing in high-speed rail?
We have had firms come in and meet with us and said they are interested in our program, have been doing some work to evaluate how they can participate and are interested in participating.
Ask you the question again, Frank. Has anyone come in and indicated an interest at this point in time to invest in high-speed rail? And if so, under what basis?
No, we do not have a specific proposal for investment. What we have are statements of interest, and this is the lowercase I interest. They are seeking opportunities.
Seeking opportunities, informal meetings that they have requested.
Through the chair, if I can
Go ahead, Mr.
follow up Mr. Rossi's line of questions. Some of these inquiries have been, is a pre-step to actually making a proposal to invest, or are they just trying to gather some financial and other factual data to determine whether a private investment is actually something that would be feasible?
In my opinion, we've seen both. We've seen some that are just exploring whether the possibility might be something they'd be interested in developing a proposal. Others seem to be had more information, had done more work, and were considering the opportunity of putting an informal proposal in. We have not seen anything presented as of yet.
So the discussion of the Las Vegas Palmdale private investment, how would you characterize those discussions, if any?
We've met with teams.
How many?
We've met both formally with the other railroad, Express West, as well as an investment firm, and who is representing some construction companies separately. So we've had several discussions for that segment.
But nothing firm yet in terms of
We have nothing presented formally.
Is that because of the stage of the development of the high-speed rail, or is that because they're still evaluating the feasibility
I
of
think there's a
investment?
number of areas. Some of them are not directly for me, but one is the maturity of the cap-and-trade program and how that can be utilized for financing. It's the maturity of the program as we're just getting to the point of looking outside of the Central Valley as the next segment. So there's a number of factors that are timing issues that are influencing where we are in that process.
When you say ensuring the cap-and-trade, is that trying to assess how long the revenue stream will be there, given...
I've heard that as one of the issues.
Because of its political nature? Or?
No, Mr. Fine could answer these questions more directly. However, there's been a couple issues with the history with the cap and trade, insufficient at this time, and for what the actual legislation that is directly related to how that impacts long-term investment.
Thank you.
The problem you have is that cap and trade has a sunset date of 2020. So
I want to make sure we're careful that we're not making a simple declarative statement around that. I think that there are some people who allege that the program was intended to be self-continuing.
It doesn't make any difference. The law is what it says. So people can allege what they like, but the law is clear. The question then becomes, can you get beyond 2020? And I think that's being addressed in a number of areas. And I think we also have to be careful here about, I mean, your answer to the question about two types of interest. I'd like to know about the second type of interest. Is that there's more than people who have more data and you think we're going to make a proposal? What would that proposal look like?
We will know that.
Let me just take a step back from this, if I might. I think what the staff is proposing is that they go out to the private sector to ask them if they have an interest in the program at this point, given the understanding of where the program stands right now, in stepping forward with some type of proposals. Now, whether that's a good idea or not, I think ought to be the subject of the conversation, but I don't think we can know what the proposals would be unless we ask. So I would simply offer that it seems to me that the nature of the discussion today, I would humbly suggest, is does it make sense for us at this point to have such an outreach? If there's some downside to that, or it doesn't make sense, or we think it's going to waste staff time and resources, that's fine. But I guess, at least for my own part, I don't know how to evaluate what we would get in terms of answers to determine whether we think those answers would justify going out and asking the question. So to me, the issue before us is, does it make sense at this point in the program to go out and do this?
If I might interject, one of the impetuses of coming forward on this formalized expression of interest is that we have had multiple meetings with investors, construction companies, people that have shown interest, but no formal proposals, nothing in writing has come forward. We are coming to a point in this program where we need to make decisions on the next round of procurements. And we need to make a decision on the approach we're going to take for those next round of procurements. This formal EOI, expression of interest, is to solicit proposals, understanding, and suggestions from industry on how to move forward, where we would either receive proposals based on, the next approach after this expression of interest would be a formal RFP based on what we gain from the expression of interest. And we either move forward where we solicit proposals, or we move forward on a different approach to solicit, to move forward on those procurements. But we're in a point in the next 12 months where we need to move forward on the next group of technical procurements, power, track, systems, in order to meet our business timeframes. And this would be the next logical step towards helping us make that decision.
But that would be an RPF to acquire something.
Right.
That's different than a request for or the opportunity to have someone invest or to arrange a set of financing that would be reasonable over time for this authority to approve. So which is it? I mean, if you're talking about an RPF, that's an issue of whatever it is we need. How we finance or acquire the articles under consideration are a different issue. And so, and you would actually talk, in some cases, to a supplier for supplier credits, but you would also talk to maybe, if it's a foreign supplier, for those things that could be supplied on a foreign basis. You might talk about export finance, or you might talk about a potential equity investment predicated on the view of the supplier as to what they think the returns would be on a leverage basis, so they get a leveraged IRR, which is bigger than a direct IRR or unleveraged IRR. What are we talking about? I'm just trying to figure out what it is we're talking about here. All of the above?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, there's a broad range, and if you step back, before. And cap and trade really was a very significant step forward, even with the uncertainties that it has. We saw a demonstrable shift in our discussions with the private sector, because they recognized it for what it was, which was a clear and strong statement by the governor, by the legislature, that the state was committed to seeing this program move forward. And I don't know that people have always fully appreciated the limitations of Prop 1A, and that it's one-time funding has to be matched. It is not an ongoing revenue stream, and so cap and trade really represented a shift. What we're looking to do, and that gives us new opportunities to also shift our procurement approach, which had been basically sequential, and move on from one construction package to another, and then you go vertically. We've had a lot of discussion with the private sector about more efficient ways of procuring things, whether it's in combination with financing or just a straight procurement. So what we're looking for is input on a range of things. One, what do our potential partners see as the best packaging of different elements in order to create greater synergy, remove interfaces, reduce time, out through what might attract investment at some point. When obviously we're not assuming anyone's going to invest before it's the right time to invest. But we're looking for input on all that, and in a way that we can reference, and not just be our view of what the market is. We want to hear directly from them. And that ties in part to the peer review group. The legislative peer review group has indicated that its primary focus in looking at our business plan going forward is going to be our discussion of the business model and how we intend to move forward in delivering this and ultimately operating it. So another byproduct of this will be to help inform that discussion and inform them and the legislature as we move ahead.
I guess my only issue here is that the uncertainty around cap and trade that we discussed before. Mr. Correa was asking about the nature of that. That is something that the California legislature, we know, is addressing right now through a number of vehicles to look at both the longevity, the tenor of the cap and trade program, and so forth. I would imagine that the outcome of that would have some bearing on how people would view the opportunities around the program. And so I'm just wondering, we have a schedule here that calls for people to come in 90 days after the release, which is going to be right at the end of the legislative session. So assuming that the legislature acts efficiently in dealing with that issue this term, it may not match up or flange up with the window in which people would be looking at creative solutions here. So that's number one. On the other hand, to the extent that in the legislative analysis of the cap-and-trade program's future, that we could help inform them about things that would, if they were components of that legislation, would facilitate earlier private sector interest, then I would think that the legislature would want to have that information. So on the one hand, this is a little bit too slow. On the other hand, it's a little bit too fast. So maybe there's a way to encourage a dialogue across the course of that would allow us to participate more effectively in the legislative process as it looks at this issue. So that was one point I wanted to make. The second point I wanted to make is that
I would suggest to you, Dan,
yeah,
that in fact, by going forward on this basis, I mean, I have questions, but it's going forward on this basis. In fact, if something were to become available, I'm not sure what the percentage chance of that happening are, but if something were to become available on the basis that we sit today, it would only get better. Mm-hmm. So that you probably want to proceed in any case, a little bit faster, a little bit slower. You want to go as fast as you could, yeah, if you thought there was something there, right?
Right. I agree with that. That makes perfect sense. But if there was some 5% piece that was missing, right, it'd be nice to know that. The one other thing I wanted to just say is that in looking at the key questions for the private sector, but also on the page before, the information to be provided, the last item on that list is legal requirements. And I would just want to make sure that we're making it absolutely clear to people, because we've wasted a fair amount of time with people coming in and saying, okay, we're happy to do this, we're ready to do this, we're ready to write checks. All you need to do is to provide us a floor of operating protection, right, which we cannot do consistent with the provisions of Prop 1A that don't allow for an operating subsidy. So let's just make sure we are crystal clear when we're going out to people, so we're not wasting their time or ours. That this is an area where there is a risk, it's a gap before we have an established ridership level, that that's the thing that I think you're really trying to plumb from the private sector, is what they're willing to do. But it can't be one of these assume a can opener things where they come in and say, I can do all this if you do something that we're just not legally empowered to do. So I would just say I think we need to be crystal clear in that part about the legal requirements, so we're not wasting everybody's time.
Agreed.
Okay.
So, board's wishes to continue. I mean, I think the discussion here has pretty much touched on all the key elements of the presentation, and I think it's probably better this discussion than my presentation. So, my wishes to the board, whatever you.
And I'm sure nobody intended to knock you off course with
fine.
The presentation, but well, let me just ask you, Mr. Vaca, are there other key things that you think are important for the board or the public to hear about this at this point that we haven't touched on?
No, I think the key point's been made. I think we're at a point in our program that we need to solicit as much input as we can from examples that have been tried around the world. We're at a point in our program in the next 6 to 12 months. We have some hard decisions to make on going forward on additional procurements, and it's timely in all those areas. So I think we look forward to the input, and we look forward to coming back to you to let you know what we've heard.
Okay, Mr. Chairman. So, I think it's a good conversation. I think that initially, at least, I was lost in maybe the semantics of the language that was being used, and at least based upon previous conversations, this seemed well in advance of what we had talked about over the previous couple of 3 or 4 years. Understanding what you have in mind here, I think that's probably the reason for the reaction you had here, because it seemed like, this is a major aspect of the success of this program, and has been from the time that this chair took over. So it's just understanding the appropriate time at which we're asking for things and what are we offering, as was just stated. And I think as you've explained this, maybe there's been oral discussions where people have expressed interest and that sort of thing, and that's probably very accurate. And I think that probably numbers of us have had the same thing occur in various discussions, but it wasn't quite as set in stone as the statement would have indicated. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yes,
if I
Mr.
may,
Correa.
just wanted to also add a couple of comments, and that is that this is, I think, a very, very critical component of the success of this project, private sector investment, and thank you for your presentation. I just want to make sure the public, as well as the board here, is clear about the progress here and what is actually needed to attract that private sector investment. So don't take it as a gotcha, but rather as we want to know. We want to be with you on this one. Thank you.
Thank you.
And, yeah, go ahead, Mr. Morales.
Again, I think we're talking a range of input that we are expecting and hoping for here that would kind of at the far end of the range involve direct private investment. But before that would also involve private participation in the procurement of things and what are the most efficient ways of procuring things, both that give us the best advantage but also attract and make things the most attractive to them. And so we're looking for input on all those types of things. Frankly, part of what we're trying to avoid, and it is the tricky part of the timing, if we move forward on individual procurements, we may preclude the opportunity to package things more efficiently, more effectively. Mm-hmm. So we want to, get the best input we can so that we can move forward. And we've seen, great results so far just through the design-build process. But we know from experience around the world that packaged procurements and tying things together is clearly the way to go. The question is, how do we get there? What's the right combination of things, and at what time?
Yeah.
And just finally, just a reminder, we also have, apart from this, the board approved unsolicited proposals ability, which
we did that before.
Can come in separate from this.
We appreciate the initiative.
Ms. Selby, you had a question?
Yeah, I had a request actually to continue, just to finish up the presentation. I think that would be helpful, just to hear the rest of the presentation, if you don't mind, board.
Not at all.
Okay.
I can go through real quickly. I believe we were discussing the fact that the next round of procurements for the authority is going to be focused on the railroad systems, both signaling and communication, the track, power, and we've already been out with our EOI on train sets. We've seen in the international market that other systems have used a packaging approach on a lot of the procurements to be more efficient and to respond to technical challenges. And we're looking to kind of duplicate that efficiency and improve management here. And that's the entire purpose of this EOI. A couple of examples, Presidio Parkway here in California used a combining procurement approach, and they're touting a 25% cost savings and efficiency there. And the largest 3P in the high-speed rail market has been Tours de Bordeaux, TGV, which have been touting the real benefits of that 3P in that arena.
That's where we're going.
This is a formalized approach. As I said, we've been getting informal discussions, and the purpose here is to formalize the expressions of interest to determine whether we can move forward on a formal process of procurement in this avenue, or we continue on a case-by-case, project-by-project basis. We believe that there are significant efficiencies in packaging a lot of the procurements, both from a risk management perspective, a financing perspective, and an overall acceleration to the program. And that's what we're looking to hopefully see at the end of this process. This process will also be used to inform and further develop our 2016 business plan and to be a strategic plan moving forward on all segments. We will be providing information to the industry to utilize for their feedback, and I list some of the documents we'll be providing. Our past business plans, our description of the potential procurements that we're looking forward to in the next 12 to 24 months, potential business model concepts, what our requirements are by law, so that they understand what our strategic vision is, what our mission is, and what our constraints are, so that they can provide a meaningful feedback to us so that we can utilize. And it's directed. Rather than try to just throw something against the wall and it might be scattered where we might not have common responses, we've tried to focus the response on specific questions so that we can evaluate common suggestions on approach. Some of the questions that we're going to be focusing on involve, can we have cost savings? Can we have acceleration by combining procurements? Different iOS sections, do they envision different initial operating segments that might be better for the program? What is the effective size of a procurement or effective size of a project that can be managed? Those are the type of very specific questions we'd like to see answers to from the industry. And the time frame is by the end of this month. We hope to have a document out in the public arena and provide about a 90-day time period for them to review the documents and come back with their suggestions and their insight on this approach, and then have one-on-one meetings with those interested parties, and then come back to the board with an update.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Selby. I think that was the right thing to do. That was good. I just have one last comment on this, which is that it's been said by other board members that this is important for us to, accelerate efforts to get the private sector involved. But I also, there are two things that I think are very important to keep in mind. The first is that this is an organization, both at the staff level and at the board level, that is very, very open to accepting of and desirous of other ideas that people have about the best and most efficient way to pursue this program. And I think when we're talking about a program of this magnitude, it's very important that we approach it that way. I think we've got highly competent staff, and we've had the benefit of excellent world-class contractors, but it doesn't mean that those of us in this organization are the font of all wisdom. And so being open to and wanting to receive other ideas, I think, will really benefit us, and that's something that should continue to be part of the culture here. The second thing I wanted to say is that something that people in government often don't say, which is that it may be that we go out right now and we don't get anything back that allows us to move forward with private sector investment at this point. This is a very complex program that is bound up by some very strict legal requirements, and it may be that we have to get to a certain point in the future before the private sector is ready to come in. That is not a failure. We are going out to test the market, and we should continue to go out and test the market. And I've just, my entire life, been a huge devotee of what Franklin Roosevelt once said, which is we should be about bold, persistent experimentation. If something doesn't work, we try something else, or we try the same thing later when the conditions change. And it'll be very easy and very tempting for people to come back and say, oh, well, they went out and there was no interest or whatever. And that's simply a reflection of where we are in the evolution of this program. We do know, going back to the statements that were made before, that there is a huge amount of private sector interest swirling around. Whether that can be something that can be done on commercial terms in a financeable way depends on a number of other factors. But there is no question the private sector is interested. Can they get across that gap to a financeable relationship with us? I think this is a good time to go out and both solicit their ideas and to test that marketplace. But I want to make sure that we put this in the context that we should always be doing things like this, and we shouldn't be afraid if things come back not exactly where we would hope at any given point. So I just wanted to make those 2 points. All right, with that,
okay. Thank you.
Go forth and see what we get. Next item on the agenda is a quarterly presentation of the Finance and Audit Committee reports with Russell Fong already demonstrating very poor powers of estimation because he scheduled 10 minutes for this presentation. Some of the board members won't finish clearing their throats in that time, but you can give it a try.
Yeah, we will try. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, board members. Mr. Morales, Russ Fong, your CFO. Thank you. The F&A committee does consist of 4 key areas. It's financial reporting, audits, project status, and risk management. Last quarter, we presented a lot of detail on these finance and audit reports, but we did believe it was important for you, our stakeholders, and the public to understand the level of oversight that's occurring in these 4 key areas. As our quarterly presentations progress, our reports too will begin to highlight in just the critical items and be a lot more streamlined. With that, let's take a look at our financial reporting in front of you. These reports here today are to help you manage performance, growth, decision-making, oversight, and back-office operations. Our first report is our age report. Last year, we presented to you, at this time, we had $32 million in aged receivables. Today, I'm happy to report that we have 0. This March report makes it 3 consecutive months that we've had 0 aged receivables.
Excuse me one second, Mr. Fong. Sure. I just, because that was a little hard to read, these reports will be available on the commission, on the authority's website.
Yes, all the Finance and Audit Committee reports are on our monthly, or on the website on a monthly basis.
I actually knew that. It was a rhetorical question, but thank you.
Sure, thank you. And we also do have handouts for the public that are here today, too. Our second report is our cash management report. This report tracks our Prop 1A cash. It monitors cash in, cash out, and it compares projected and actual expenditures. The projected cash balance versus actual cash balances. I would like to take a moment and go over our funding sources, and these are our budgets. And currently in Prop 1A, we have about $9 billion. Cap and trade, this year we have $250 million. Next year we'll have $400 million plus 25% of the annual auction proceeds. In federal funds, we have about $3.5 billion, and we have a public transportation account loan of about $29 million. Our third report highlights our summary of year-to-date budget and expenditures reports. I would like to talk about a few changes. Program 10, our budget increased from $25 million to $27 million due to legislative approval of 35 new positions and additional $2 million. The result of our overall admin increase from $29 million budget to a $32 million budget. Our year-to-date expenditures increased from $11 million to $18 million. The percentage of budget increased from 46% to 59%, with 75% of the year completed. Last year at this time, to compare, we only spent 19% of our budget. Our fourth financial report is our budget expenditure report. I'd like to highlight some key areas. This report actually consists of 3 sections. The first section displays our financial information in bar charts for those that don't like to use numbers. Our second lists our financial information by line item. And our third focuses on positions and vacancies. Changes from last quarter, our total budget did change from $29 million to $32 million due to the additional positions. Our spending did jump quite a bit to 58%, and spending has improved year over year, and we are on track to spend within our appropriated $32 million budget.
And just to clarify for the public, this is expenditures of the authority itself, not of the
Correct. This is the administrative budget only.
The administrative budget,
yes.
Right.
Here's our financial information displayed by line items, changes from January to May. Salaries and benefits have increased by about $1.4 million, with operating expenses at about $815,000, and these are due to the new 35 positions that were recently added. We did move our financial advisor expenditures of about $2.5 million and reallocated from external contracts to our capital outlay budget where it's appropriately budgeted for. Our third section focuses on our positions and summary vacancies. Some key highlights: the Assembly and Senate, I'm happy to report, just recently approved our 2 spring finance letters to make our 35 positions permanent and an additional 10 positions for next year. We currently have 209 positions compared to the 174 we had last year. Of the 35 new positions that were authorized in March, 10 have already been filled, 24 have been advertised. Our vacancy rate before the 35 new positions was 13.9%. The vacancy rate after the 35 positions is now 30.9%, but I'm happy to report today we're already down to 24.8%. That leaves us 52 vacant positions out of 209, but all 52, I'm happy to report, are being actively recruited. I'd like to turn our attention to our capital outlay and expenditures report, and as the chairman just mentioned, this is our capital outlay budget. This is our projects budget, not the administrative budget. This report is somewhat complex. It consists of 10 reports, and it highlights current year versus project total, highlights planning versus construction, and also compares the source of funding. Total expenditures for the year are at 42% of a budget of $479 million as we ramp up construction activities. In general, changes to the capital outlay budget are due to shifts in our schedule. As the schedules shift, the budget will update accordingly. The main driver for the decrease in our budget currently is a delay in right-of-way parcels certified to the design builder contract, which impacts the construction schedule. Turning our attention to our capital outlay, spending in right-of-way and third-party agreements have increased dramatically, and we are closing the gap between our projected and actual expenditures. I will say we've had the last 3 months our highest totals for right-of-way purchases. We had $25 million, $26 million, and $31 million last month, and those figures are tremendously higher than they were in the past, so we are ramped up in the right-of-way area. Some other key areas in our capital outlay budget, the total projects and the annual budget are in parentheses. For fiscal year 14-15, our budget, we decreased from $859 million to $479 million. Correspondingly, our planning decreased by from $71 million to $63 million, and our construction decreased from $788 million to $416 million, again reflecting our scheduling change.
And that's basically right-of-way.
That's correct. Yep. Okay. The next slide presents our percentage of capital outlay budget actually spent. Current year 14-15 budget, we spent 13% of an $859 million budget to 42% of a $479 million budget, again due to the schedule change. Program to date budget has increased 12% to 14%. That budget remains the same. It's key to note that most of the planning occurs ahead of constructions, which is why planning spending rates are significantly ahead of construction rates. Our sixth report is our total projects expenditures with forecast. This report gives an overall view of our projects expenditures, and it includes a forecast. Changes that have occurred since last quarter. In fiscal year 14-15, our construction and other program forecasts declined from $745 million to $382 million due to delays in right-of-way, which affects, again, our construction schedule. Fiscal year 14-15, our administrative forecast declined from $29 million to $28 million, due largely to the reallocation of our financial advisor contract, which is slightly offset by the increase in our 35 positions. As a result, the total program forecast has declined from $870 million to $506 million. Turning our attention to our contracts and expenditure report, this report lists all active contracts by vendor, small business utilization, contract amount, encumbered amount, actual expenditures, the balance, and forecasted expenditures through the contract term, and a brief description of the contract. Some of the challenges ahead are in the small business arena are that companies with specific hiring expertise are having a little challenge in meeting their small business goals. However, as an organization, we do anticipate small business utilizations to increase as construction moves forward. An example I'd like to give you is our design build contractor, Tudor Perini Zachary Parsons. TPZP expenditures increased from $99 million to $118 million, and their small utilization increased also from 7.5% to 9%. Total invoices have increased from $311 million to $375 million, and our small business subtotals have increased $49 million to $67 million. Our current small business utilization rate has gone up from 16% to its current 18%. My final report is tracks our monitors, basically our key projects and all of our initiatives. I'm happy to report we currently have 8 projects that we're currently tracking, 6 with a green status, 1 with a yellow, and 1 is currently on hold. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and as we transition to audit, I'd like to introduce Paula Rivera. Thank you.
Before we bring up Ms. Rivera, can you just talk about what is the financial system in the financial office that's on hold and why?
Yeah, so the high-speed rail with its complexity and its budget and accounting and basically it's all financial arena, we will need a financial system of some kind. Currently, I put this particular project on hold because we're in the process of upgrading and going live with Fiscal. Fiscal is the state's budgeting and accounting system. We're on target, or we're proposed to go live middle of this summer. With Fiscal going live, we'll have a better idea what Fiscal can do, and then see what the gaps are for what we need for our particular project.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other questions for Mr. Fong before Ms. Rivera?
Good report, Russ.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was a good report. Thank you. I was going to say, he left. This is, I don't know if this reminds you of anything, Mike, but he left Paula like 30 seconds.
Yeah, no, it reminds you of a meeting that you left me 15.
Yeah, that was it. Fortunately, the mic wasn't up then. Ms. Rivera's smiling. I don't know. Yeah. Oh, Ms. Selby.
I just had a few questions.
Sure. I'm sorry. Excuse me.
No problem. The first one is, could you talk a little bit about the caution, the one that is, the project that is on caution status?
Yeah, that one's in the current process of this is the
leased vehicles.
Yeah, the leased cars.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one's currently in process of being procured or finalized. It has to go through, unfortunately, quite a few departments for it to be approved. We anticipate that should be off our charts probably within the next month or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And the other question had to do with the small business percentage. And I did note that there are some, the ones that I looked at are just a few of the different groups that have a lot of their project already expended, and yet they're not close to the 30%. And those are the ones that I'm concerned about. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that and see if, it doesn't seem to me like they're going to be able to meet their 30% because they've basically spent a lot of their money, and so I wanted to bring that to attention.
Each of us manages our own particular contracts. For instance, a contract that reports directly to me is our financial advisor contract, KPMG. I would say it's been somewhat of a challenging, being that they're a financial advisor, to find some small businesses, but they do a fantastic job in making sure that they hire small businesses and utilize what they have to make sure we're meeting our needs, but to also to reach out to the small business community, and I believe their percentage is about 28%. The contracts that are close to year end, it's going to be a little challenging, and it's going to be difficult. As you can see, our fluctuations month to month doesn't change a whole lot. I would just encourage staff, as we are today, is to encourage those contractors that we do business with to focus on meeting that 30% goal that we all have. But each contract is a little different. Some have their unique challenges. But I do anticipate as a whole, with Tudor Perini, Zachary, and Parsons being such a large dollar amount, that as they hit their goal, it'll help the high-speed rail as a whole, but it doesn't answer your question about each individual contract.
Yeah, I think the one in particular, and I can't find it right now, but it's URS Hatch.
Yeah.
That there was some group there, and they're in the 12 to 17% range with almost all of their not all of it, but maybe 20% of their money left to spend. And so my question, I guess, to the board is there anything that we can do as a board to more than say we encourage you to? Is there anything we can do if it looks like these large companies that have these multi-million-dollar projects are not meeting their goals?
If I can just clarify on that one, and if I need to be corrected, somebody will, assume. But that one in particular, you remember the board, the 30% goal went into effect in, I believe it was August of 2012. So we had a lot of the major contracts for the regional consultants had been awarded prior to the goal being in place. So there was no commitment. There was no requirement. There was no goal. We went back anytime there. We've applied the 30% to all new contracts, but also to any contract modifications as we've gone through. So on some of the large contracts, the bulk of the expenditure happened before the goal was in place. And so for those, there probably is no way to catch up to the 30. And that's the difference on that one and some of the other large ones.
Is there any stick? I mean, is there anything, if the company doesn't reach the 30% goal, is there anything that we have in our power to say?
Well, Tom, I'll ask you to talk a little bit about enforcement mechanisms, but again, for one where the provision was added late in the term of the contract, what we have been doing is then monitoring on a current basis to try to get them certainly 30% of what they're spending. In some cases, again, if 80% of the contract value had already been expended, there mathematically would be no way to recapture it. You can't go backwards, obviously, on it. So that's been the challenge with those. But we work through the Business Advisory Committee and other steps to try to do everything we can to promote it. And again, I would say we've seen on every contract since the goal has been in place, bidders are taking it seriously. They're under contract. The timing of the actual expenditures will change based on what the actual scope of work is for those small businesses. So on the construction contract, for instance, a significant amount will be on trucking, and they haven't begun the big part of the trucking yet. So we'll see the numbers move dramatically depending on where we are in the program. It's not a straight line 30% on any given month. It's over the life of the contract.
Thank you.
You good? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fong. Ms. Rivera. We're hoping for some more of that auditor humor that you bring.
Smile may be it today. Good morning. I'm Paula Rivera. I'm with Audit, and I wanted to provide an update on audit activities since our last presentation. So that would be the third quarter. We issued an audit report on contract management, the scope of which was to determine if contracts are managed effectively and in accordance with authority policies and procedures. We issued that report, and the authority identified their corrective actions to establish contract policies and procedures, including the development of contract performance standards. They also have held a number of trainings, but they've been trainings that have been specifically targeted at contract monitoring, documenting roles and responsibilities, communicating when you have division of responsibility, and then also the requirements for appropriate contract documentation. We also have issued a couple of reports on pre-award reviews. A pre-award is done before a contract is executed when it's a request for qualification, so the selection is qualification-based. We look to determine that the contractor proposed costs are reasonable and in accordance with the federal regulations. And so we issued two of those reports on regional consultant contracts, Burbank to Anaheim and Palmdale to Burbank. We have a number of audits in progress. An audit of the procurement process. We're assessing the efficiency and effectiveness of the existing process. That one actually was issued in April, but it's since the end of the last quarter. We are getting ready to issue a report on prompt payment. There was an audit that was done a couple years ago, so we went in and did a follow-up to take a look if the findings and the corrective actions were implemented. We also have an audit in progress to look at the right-of-way acquisition process. This was a very narrowly scoped audit to look to determine if the process is adequate, and then we'll go in later to take a look at the management of that process. But we just took a look at the process and all the requirements, the Uniform Act, which is the federal law, and the property acquisition law, which is the state law. And then we also have 2 pre-award reviews in process. One for the rail development partner contract and one on a contract for subsidence monitoring. Upcoming in the fourth quarter, we'll initiate an audit on the design build contract. And this is not a broad audit of the costs or anything. We're looking narrowly at are the management practices consistent with the design-build risk model? So it's the allocation of risk between the authority and the contractor. We'll conduct a small business follow-up review. We completed an audit last year about this time. They have reported some corrective actions, and we'll follow up to see that those corrective actions have been implemented. And then we will also follow up on our contract management audit. We interviewed 72% of the contract managers with the authority, and we will go back and interview the remaining contract managers that we didn't identify or didn't speak with the first time. These are a number of smaller contracts, and it's a higher number of contract managers, but we want to be sure that our universe for this contract is 100%. We'll also go back and look to see that the corrective actions that were discussed have been implemented. Any questions?
I actually have a question, but I'm going to direct it to Mr. Rossi on the Finance and Audit Committee. Ms. Rivera's just done a nice cogent job of telling us the scope of things that her department has been looking at, and in the past and what's upcoming. What's not here is, to the extent that things are, the audit findings would raise issues or concern at the board level. I mean, our first line of defense is the Finance and Audit Committee that you and Vice Chair Richards populate. But I guess my question for both of you is, I don't, personally, speaking only for myself, not for other board members, I don't need to know certain information if an audit finds that there have been mistakes on something and they get corrected and all that. But at some point, when things hit kind of a 2 sigma or 3 sigma deviation, how can we be confident that that is passed on to the rest of the board members so that we're in an appropriate position with respect to management to know, to discharge our governance responsibilities? So what triggers sending up the balloon?
No, we don't want to, Tom and I don't want you guys to know, so we're not sending it up.
Okay. Well, now that we're clear on that, so
no,
when the governor calls, I just
tell them walk down the hall. Right. It's a good question, and I think the answer is this. In all of the audits that Paula has done under our watch, she does 2 things that would allow us to decide if it's of a magnitude worthy of coming to the board. First, when you look at her recommendations for each audit, management responds. Either they agree or they disagree. So far, we've never seen a disagreement, so management agrees, and they implement her recommendations. So you know that, and then we get a follow-up in 90 days, or however much time we pick, but try to keep it in 90 days, as to whether or not those things have been implemented and we're moving forward. Should something occur that we didn't get a response from management that was acceptable, that would immediately come to the board. The second area is that we have asked, which they don't do anywhere else in the state, so it is new. I think that's correct, Paula. We actually assign a risk rating to exceptions, so that as you go through the process, Paula can tell you whether, by assigning a risk rating, you look at an audit exception and it goes like this. Is it a problem for the overall project? Is it a serious issue? Is it an issue of process? And so far, we haven't had any to speak of in the rankings that have been worthy of bringing to this board. But we could, in the next report, submit that sheet that shows what those rankings were. And we might do that, explain what they are. But those would be the two things that would trigger bringing something to the board.
Okay. Yeah, I think having that summary sheet at the end would be good.
Yeah, we can do that.
Because I'm just thinking of something. I mean, it would probably trigger a high risk rating. That's the best example I could come up with right now. Is,
well, we actually found one. It was when she did the exam of the board's travel expenditures. She had you there, but we decided.
It's good. The only risk on that is that no, never mind. Some jokes are guns that shoot backwards. That's all I can say. What I was going to say is that there may be something where there is an issue. Let's say it's contract management. There's a particular area where somebody's outside of the parameters that we want to see, and it's being corrected, but still, we may get an inquiry, gee, what about this? I'd like to be able to say, well, yes, it's been identified as being corrected. So, again,
but Dan, that becomes...
I don't want to get inundated with data.
Look, I understand what you want, but if you want that, then we'll just send you every exception, because there's no way to know the answer to that question. I mean, there just is no way to know that.
Well, but I guess my question to you is, are you saying that in the risk rating, I mean, there ought to be some risks that would create a pretty clear threshold?
Well, that's what I just said. Depending on where we fall in the rankings.
What you're saying is we haven't had any of those. Okay. All right.
If we've had anything, there's certainly that nothing has risen to the level of materiality given a project this size.
That's what I'm trying to
There
get
have
to.
been no issues that we've noted on any of the results of audits that have had financial implications that would even rise above our committee level. There have been things that you would expect in a younger, growing organization with policies and procedures that ultimately could go in a direction that we would be concerned about. But I think that Paula and her audits have identified these things, and they are being corrected in the early stages of where we are. And these are things that you would probably have expected with an organization that 4 years ago or whatever had 17 people, and now however many, what are we, 170 or 140 something, and we've had some turnover also.
Okay.
Yeah, hey, look, there are only really two types of things that you'd be concerned about. Systemic issues,
right,
which you would expect in the early days of an organization because it's just starting to find its rhythm, and understanding whether or not its processes work, and all of those things. So you worry about systemic issues. And you worry about the one-off issue that you were talking about, but there's no way to know what that issue will be until it happens, right? And so we haven't had the latter. We have had some systemic issues that are predicated on the fact that, as Tom said, it is in many respects a startup organization, and getting all of those processes and procedures to work effectively takes a little time, and you can see an actual improvement as we've been monitoring this stuff. Yeah. But as of this time, I would say, and Tom can speak for himself, I haven't seen anything that rises to the level of materiality that is worthy of a presentation to this board at this stage.
Okay. Well,
we can't add that other sheet, which sort of lays it out.
All I was really caring about was that there was some kind of objective tripwire, and it sounds as though there is, and so I'm fine with that. And
it's not objective, but there is a tripwire.
Right. Well, you guys have done a great job on that committee, so I appreciate that. Are there other questions for Ms. Rivera?
Mr. Chairman, I would just point out, since we can never have enough audits. We are, in addition to the work that we do through internal audit, which again is focused on those things that we are concerned about and making sure we're doing things right, we have external audits that are performed by the Bureau of State Audits, by the U.S. DOT, that look at our compliance with federal regs and procedures and other things. So That's Paula's workload is not the extent of the auditing that is done of the program.
Right. No, that's a good point. And then I also would just supplement that point with this, which is that the board takes its governance responsibilities very seriously, and part of the way that we're organized is that, and correct me if I misstate this, but Ms. Rivera in the internal audit function reports to the board, not to the CEO. And that's also true of, I believe, Mr. Tapping in the risk management function. So that's just part of the way that this is organized, which I think is highly appropriate given what we're trying to do here. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Mr. Jarvis.
Good morning. I think I'm into negative float here with the time, so we'll click along.
This is important stuff.
We've talked about the status of the first construction segment earlier this morning, and so I'm going to present various status reports, and what they're really focused on is the status of the first construction segment. CP1, we're starting construction. CP23, we'll have an executed contract by the end of this month. And CP4, we talked about the RFP earlier. So what we've put together for the status reports is to comply with various legislative requirements and various reporting requirements. So we have a monthly status report, we have performance metrics, and we also provide the status of our right-of-way acquisition on a monthly basis. Specifically, we have 4 performance status reports. One is for the CP1 monthly status. The other is for the CP1 performance metrics, the right-of-way acquisition status, and then also the performance metrics of State Route 99, who the authority has contracted with to deliver a section within CP1.
That's contracted with Caltrans.
Contracted with Caltrans, that's correct. So the monthly status report, the overall purpose of that is to provide a status of us meeting requirements dealing with progress, schedule, and budget for CP1. And we also measure the status of various key performance. It has both a quantitative aspect and a qualitative aspect. It has a lot of number information on schedule, financial status, contract time, etc. And then there's also written qualitative information on the status of the project. So that's provided on a monthly basis for CP1. For CP1, we also provide performance metrics, and we measure our performance against certain industry standard performance objectives. One area is the standard project management areas of cost, schedule, and quality. And then we also measure areas of high priority to the authority, safety, and economic benefits. So to measure those, we've broken it up into 5 key metric areas: safety, cost, schedule, quality, and economic benefits. And then within those 5 areas, there's 9 individual performance metrics, which I will briefly go through now. For the safety area, we measure the authority safety incident rate, and we've been doing well there. We're well into the green on that. We also measure the contractor's safety incident rate, and that is in the green and doing well on that measurement as well. We also measure cost. This measurement is for our design and construction support costs, specifically the support cost of our project and construction management PCM firm. Right now it is higher than we would like it to be. Our goal is to be less than 6%. We're at 7.9%. The primary driver of that is the design build invoice amount to date is lagging due to a later than anticipated construction start. And so we have a fairly constant design and construction support cost, but it's divided by a smaller design build invoice to date amount than we had originally anticipated.
Mr. Chairman, let me just, on that point, I just want to clarify and also update the board a little bit on where we are in terms of major construction activities. Since, well, for a year, and certainly since the groundbreaking, we've been, our contractors have been actively involved in a lot of the preparatory work to major construction, utility relocation, demolition of buildings, things that have been constant activities. We're now on the at the point where the serious upward construction will begin. In fact, by the end of this month, the Fresno River Viaduct will begin, and we'll have 4 to 5 major sites underway in June and by July. So these numbers will change dramatically, as will the employment numbers, small business utilization, all those things we'll start to see over the summer will change very dramatically with the initiation of the heavy sustained construction.
Our measurement for cost, one of our measurements is we measure the contingency amount. And this is based upon the contingency as compared to the remaining contract value. And that has stayed fairly consistent in the range of 16%. So we are very comfortable with the remaining contingency amount that we have on the project.
I'm just curious why it goes up, the contingency percentage, from 16.4 to 16.6. Is that just you have additional projects with more contingency, or?
No, because this is measured as a ratio, and so what we do is we take the remaining contingency. So we have a pot of contingency, and as we write change orders, we take money out of that contingency. So the pot of contingency is getting smaller, but then also it's divided based upon the remaining contract amount, which continues to get smaller as well. So the ratio could go up or could go down depending on that numerator and denominator. So it's not measured just based upon the contingency amount.
Well, and the contingency which was approved, set by the board, was not set on a percentage basis. It happened to, this is the percentage it worked out to. It was set on a specific analysis of the risks. So this is just a way of, again, of capturing where we are relative to it, but it's not against a hard percentage.
We also measure schedule. Now this is similar to the design and construction support costs as far as the driver, because a driver of this is the design contractor, design build contractor's earned value or invoice to date amount. And again, that is lower than we had anticipated, and so therefore this schedule index is in the red, but as Mr. Morales talked about, we do anticipate some significant improvement in this performance measurement by the end of this year.
And just as a reminder, it's noted here in several places, I think none of these indicators at this point is indicative of a trend. We're just too early in the project. So whether it's in the, don't be too hardened by it being in the green or discouraged by it being in the red, because there's just not enough data yet. What we're really showing is that we will be measuring this over the course of the project, and so you will be able to see it as it becomes more robust.
Yeah, the other way you might put that, Jeff, is all the stuff you see in the red, you will more likely see moving to the yellow and green as the project commences, and the stuff that's way to the green.
Mike, bring your mic down so that.
In the meters that are way to the green will probably will move more towards the yellow as you do the project.
For quality, we measure construction nonconformance reports. We're early in the construction process, but we are in the green for this quality measurement. We have several economic benefit measurements. One is the disadvantaged small business enterprises. This is based upon the contract amount with the design builder, which is approximately 29% at this point. So we are favorable with this measurement. We also, as part of the economic benefits, measure the percentage of national targeted workers that are hired, and we're doing very well, significantly above the 30% goal for that. And then a subset of that national targeted workers are disadvantaged workers, and our goal is 10% of our national targeted workers to be disadvantaged, and we're doing very well in that measurement as well, at about 43% of disadvantaged workers. We also measure the status of our right-of-way acquisition. As Mr. Fong talked about, we have made some significant improvements in the acquisition of right-of-way in the last 3 months, so we continue to work on improving that right-of-way performance. To date, on CP1, we list 149 parcels here, but just to kind of give you an idea, it's very dynamic. Since this was submitted, we're at 160 parcels delivered to the design builder, and when we have an executed contract for CP23, we have 33 parcels that we will be able to hand over to the CP23 contractor immediately. So this is a bar chart, which is a quick look of the right-of-way status as compared to various right-of-way delivery milestones as you move through the process. And so if you look on the far right of your screen or the paper, it shows our different contracts or different regions of those contracts based upon the different color. And then as you move from the left to the right, that takes you through the right-of-way delivery process. And so as you can see, if you look at the fourth bar in FWO, that stands for First Written Offer, we have made significant progress. And for CP1, CP23, we have submitted most of the first written offers. The ultimate goal as you go down is to get to that bar chart on the far right to the design builder, which, like I said, we're at 160 at this point. But this shows the various milestones and where we're at and the number of parcels that are in those milestones as we deliver the parcels. I mentioned that we have contracted with Caltrans for State Route 99 realignment project, and similarly, they track 9 individual performance metrics within 5 key performance metric areas. Most of them are the same as ours, so I won't go through all of those specifically, and they're all green except one, and that is for the small business DVBE usage. Now, the reason for that, this is what's called a CMGC contract, a construction manager general contractor, and they have hired a general contractor to provide constructability review input during the design phase, which is the phase that project is in. And so there's very limited opportunities to contract out that expertise at this point, but we do anticipate once that contract actually goes to construction, there'll be a lot more small business contracting opportunities, and that metric will improve. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Board member, questions? Ms. Perez-Estelano?
Thanks, Scott. Thanks so much for this. I just want to, can you remind us where we are with the right-of-ways? It seems like we've caught up and we've built up the teams in terms of the consultant support to get us where we needed. But I recall in previous, I can't remember if it was CP1 or 2.3, I think it was, where we were, the right-of-way acquisition process was delaying the program.
Yeah, that would be CP1.
Okay.
And we rebaseline with an agreement with our design builder. We've rebaselined that schedule for right-of-way. So we're very close to that current schedule that we've rebaselined. We do have a bit of a challenge with the schedule coming forward. We have delivered the majority of the parcels that are not going through the condemnation process. So if you look at, I think it's slide 51, but if you look at the right-of-way metrics, you'll see that we have, for Ron submitted, we have a pretty high amount of parcels in that area. So that shows we've submitted a lot of resolution of necessities. Those projects, those parcels are in the condemnation process. So now we're working our way through that condemnation process on CP1. For CP23, we're actually ahead of the plan right now.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And just to clarify, because something starts in the eminent domain process doesn't mean it will necessarily end up in the eminent domain process. We continue to negotiate, and we start the process so that the clock starts. and this is consistent with how it's done elsewhere. So the actual number going through the full eminent domain process we expect to be much smaller than this, but we need to initiate the process.
Okay. Other questions? Thank you, Mr. Jarvis. Mr. Tapping?
Good morning. John Tapping, Director of Risk Management and Project Controls. We've heard a bit today about the financial performance, audits and reviews, and contracts performance. I like to think of risk management as kind of wrapping it all together and integrating it. Financial performance is kind of ongoing and in the rears looking. Audits is looking at best practices and lessons learned. Contract performance is measuring performance as we move along, but risk management really is looking ahead and looking at uncertainties and risks as a project progresses, setting contingencies based on risk analysis such that we can manage the project prudently. So we have a risk management plan that incorporates all of these aspects. There are also reporting requirements for the legislature. Senate Bill 1029 has reporting requirements that include a robust risk management process, including identification of all risks, prioritizing risk, quantification of risks, and managing the risks in terms of risk responses. We also have a robust quantitative approach to looking at risk management in terms of setting contingency and updating estimates and so forth. Program objectives really risk management done properly is a disciplined approach to a very simple process, 5-step process. And really what we've implemented is a very disciplined approach in looking at the 5 steps of risk management that can look in terms of impact, uncertainty that can impact the cost or the schedule in moving, or the quality or any other project value in moving forward. But we also look at opportunities. For example, we can identify risks up front. We can allocate resources to it and mitigate the risk. And we do that actually on a week-to-week, day-to-day basis as we move forward and we relook at our risk. It's also a very open process. So as we move forward, all the stakeholders, the board, can understand the risk going forward. Case in point, one of our risks on CP1 was the right-of-way acquisition, which we had contemplated, in fact, and have a risk response strategy for, which Scott talked about. But so there's transparency in knowing what our risks are going forward, and our uncertainty, and how we can mitigate those risks. Naturally, I talked about allocating resources using a risk approach, but also we're doing a state-of-the-art program, and we're looking at other programs on how they're approaching risk. One of the collaborators that I'm working with is Professor Flivberg from Oxford, who is looking at things like reference class and tops-down analysis, as well as bottoms-up. So we're doing kind of a series of best practices as we move forward. So I talked about a pretty simple process. You identify, assess, analyze, manage, monitor, and control. It's hard to read the pictorials at the bottom, but they're more or less talking points for me. The bottom left is an example of a risk register. So we have a risk register on every project. We have a program risk register, and we have risk responses for all of those risks identified. We have risk owners for all of those risks, and we update those at least on a quarterly basis. Above that, you can see what is typically referred to as a heat map. You can prioritize those risks on the risk register in terms of cost or schedule impact, and so it's a great management tool for quickly identifying which risks to assign resources to and to attack head on. We get there to a little more sophisticated. The bottom bell curve represents the output of a Monte Carlo analysis, which gives you basically a range of outcomes for probability and impact. So for all of your risks on a project, you can identify a probability and impact. And if you have, for example, 100 risks on CP1, you can run this model, and it can give you a confidence level that you're going to finish on budget or on schedule. And that's the exact process that we use to set the contingency for CP1 done, and at the last board meeting approving the risk-informed contingency for CP2 and 3. The upper right, once we've identified the risks, we can also perfect the design-build contract or the procurement contract going forward in looking at each risk and seeing where it's best allocated. For example, the contractor can manage means and methods, for example, and so we would allocate that risk to him. Where governmental approvals are required, we retain that risk, and we perhaps can manage that better. So we go through that process, and through the series of design-build contracts have really perfected our term sheets as we've gone forward using a risk approach. And the bottom right represents a schedule risk analysis, which we're now doing on all of our CP projects. It really drives the cost risk analysis. Basically, you have a schedule, you have a critical path to the schedule, you put uncertainties on the durations, and you insert the risks that you've identified. And again, it gives you the output can give you a Monte Carlo analysis that shows you your probability of finishing on schedule. So current activities this quarter, we continue to update the CP1 risk-informed analysis, updating it with recent right-of-way trends, for example, and the other risk drivers, third-party agreements. And so we've updated that. We will continue to update that and trend it against the approved contingency, which is running about $157 million at this point, I believe. CP23 risk-informed analysis, we completed that analysis last month and brought the recommendation to the board, and we will continue to update that analysis at critical milestones of the project. And then CP4, which Scott talked about earlier, we are proceeding with our contingency analysis for that. We've completed the schedule risk analysis, and that will drive the contingency analysis. These pictorials are commonly known as sensitivity diagrams or tornado diagrams, and they represent the relative value of the risks on the project value, whether it be cost or schedule or quality. So again, it comes out of a Monte Carlo analysis, and it's a very good tool, again, for picking key risk drivers and assigning very robust risk response plans for those particular activities. As we've advanced, one of my philosophies in going forward is to drive a bottoms-up risk management approach from all of our consultants and contractors. We now have risk management provisions in our design-build contracts and our PCM contracts. So, the PCM contracts have done a level of risk management. For example, on CP23, they have actually done an independent risk analysis and Monte Carlo analysis, and it actually validated the top-down approach that we did to set the contingency. So as we move forward, I want the PCMs, as the owner's agent in administering the design-build contract, to take ownership of their particular risk register. They will have the updates. It'll be a bottoms-up driven process, but from a corporate perspective, we will continue to integrate overall risk management practices and analysis to make sure it's integrated. But we want to have a uniform risk approach throughout the program, but we also want the projects to own the risk register. So this is just a summary to the general presentation today. You've seen the members of the Finance and Audit team. They're directly accountable to the Finance and Audit Committee. We're an integrated team, and there's robust monitoring and controls in place to manage this program, as we've identified. Any questions?
Hey, John.
Ms. Selby.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify a little bit on the, so what you're doing on the idea of the bottoms-up, top-down, is that you're taking it both from the design-build side. When you say bottoms-up, are you literally starting from the folks in the field, or is this still sort of the manager's assessing this? And also, are you comparing the two on a quarterly basis? And then finally, are we within range of where we think we should be, and what direction is it moving?
Yeah. We're really it's really a recent development to take the approach to have the PCM actually do the risk analysis. And it is quite bottoms up. They're most familiar with once it gets going. We're 150 miles away. And doing the risk analysis, we can go down for a workshop, but they live it day to day. So they do the workshop, they identify the risk, and we have done a gap analysis between the two. And we will ultimately have one analysis, but what it does do is instills a sense of ownership of the project and risk management, and that's really the culture that I want to impart is throughout the organization, not just a top-down corporate thing. Did that answer your question?
Are you on target, and what direction is it going in terms of?
Yes. The analysis on 2-3 validated there were some, it was a lower level of detail of risks, a different type of schedule analysis, but it did validate the results.
Was it 158 million? Was that the number?
CP23 is the one we did it for.
Okay.
Yet it did validate the 70% confidential level of 2-3, which I believe was 265 or something like that.
And that was the first time you'd done it, so you don't know sort of which direction it's going? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions?
Yeah. John, thank you for your presentation. Can you help us, if you go back to slide 51, and I don't have any additional reference material, but I can't, not that one, the other one.
This one?
Yeah. So if you could help us understand what we're looking at, because I can't really understand what that means, risk exposure. I'm looking, I'm taking, I can't read it, and I don't understand, like, for example, I don't understand what the top line, it says, I'm sure it's the Buy America requirement.
Yeah.
So just in the future, and I don't have any additional documents in my packet, and I'm assuming the public doesn't have it either, and so I want to make sure that as we're, going through these evaluations and we're doing updates, that it's more clear in terms of what are the kind of greatest risk issues we face, and then helping the board as well as the public decipher what are those issues and how to read the information.
I can absolutely do that. This is more or less a talking point slide, but we can certainly have that presentation.
Okay, thanks.
Other comments or questions? Well, I want to thank Mr. Tapping for the presentation and just share something that Mr. Morales leaned over and said to me, which is no one else is doing anything like this on major projects. And I know that the common understanding is that large projects always go awry, and no one's going to sit here and insult people's intelligence by saying that we could be totally immune from that. But I think that the kind of both transparency and the financial reporting, as well as the internal controls we have, and bolstered by this risk management approach, certainly gives us as many tools and as sophisticated tools as I think exist anywhere in any kind of public infrastructure project. So we'll see how it turns out, but certainly I think that this board is, and the staff's very attentive to these issues, and it's actually kind of an exciting thing to see as people try to bring new tools to these projects. So, thank you all to the staff who presented this morning. It was a lot longer than 10 minutes, but that's okay, because this is really the stuff that we're supposed to be doing at the board. Okay, so at this point, we will enter into closed session to discuss those items per the agenda. We'll report back after that, and thank everybody for being here so far. Thank you.
Okay, what time is it now? 1:20. How far are we from the Capitol? 5 blocks.
Okay, the meeting of the closed session has concluded. We have nothing to report. This meeting, the California High-Speed Rail Authority Board, is concluded. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. You guys have anything?